can come forward. So we've got Jacques Abbott. She's a senior software and machine learning engineer from Red Rabbit. She's picked that seat, so welcome. We've got Dr. Roshan Naikar. He's a mathematician. He's actually founder and director of North Ocean. And he's also Project Ubu. We've got Project Ubu also represented here in the audience. So you will participate. Thanks, Gerard. We've got Alistair Hoffert. He's a cognitive intelligent automation lead at PwC South Africa. So thanks, Alistair. We've got Owens Cloud Harry. He's the VP of AI at Absa Bank. Thank you very much for joining. And then we've got Gerard Miller, which I've already thanked. Yeah, that's Gerard. He's the AI Artificial Intelligence Lead Risk Assurance at PwC South Africa. And he's got this very strong banking background as well, so we're also collaborating. Okay, so this was actually a slide put together by Gerard as well. And you can see, please tag us at hashtag MIIA PwC Meetup. So if you want to do that, you're most welcome. Okay, so let's get everybody quickly here. So what I'm going to do, let's start there, but we're going to go through the whole thing there. So, okay, everybody's got a mic? Testing, cool. Okay, so what I will do is we're going to keep this, you can sit here, no, you can sit here, no, I'll stand here. You sit here, I'll stand. Okay. I like standing, no problem standing. Okay, so what we will do is, I'll act as moderator. I know, Gerard, you've got specific questions, we're going to share that.
Lots of questions.
You've got lots of questions. PwC always have lots of questions, so that's good. We'll ask some specific questions, but we will also open it up to you. If you feel you've got a specific question, you can just put your hand up. I don't know if we've got a mic for other people as well. Maybe use the mic, if people want to, you can grab one of these mics. And then you're most welcome to ask questions. We want, remember this is for us, so let's try to get the most out of it as well. Clearly, we are talking about AI, IoT, but we talk about opportunities, pitfalls, and we can keep it on various levels. We've got people like Owens that's really can give you a tech deep down on all the platform stacks and stuff. We've got the Russian that's can talk about math as well. But we've got obviously, I think, Alistair. Maybe I should stand somewhere here or something that I can see the people at least. Yeah, maybe if you can move just a little bit like that, that will be awesome. And I can see, I can maybe stand here. That's it. Cool. Okay, so I think I want to open it up to Gerard. Maybe start with you specifically. If you think about opportunities, and let's just make it an open question initially to start off with. How does PwC think about AI? What's your specific approach? And also think about the pitfalls as well. Think about PwC. Clearly, it's such an important area. How does PwC think about this from that perspective?
So it's obviously growing. I think there's massive space for growth, sort of globally. So we can see that happening globally. I think over here. What we're seeing is, that, there's a lot of work to be done, sort of, locally, to get to where the guys are globally. I think that's part of, what we sort of, want to do from our perspective. I think the one thing, that I do want to ask the panel is, why is it, do you think, that you don't see lots of AI everywhere? Everybody talks the talk, there's buzzwords around it, but you don't really see it much out there. What is your response in terms of that? I see you.
Jacques, are you ready to?
I can see you. You're already smiling.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. I think the first one is people don't trust machines like AI in general.
So why is that?
Why don't they trust it? I think they've got valid reason, in my opinion. So we're taking data that humans have created and we're training a machine on it. Now, I can criticize a human being for being biased, but it feels like a lot of people don't have the knowledge about AI. I think, but it's machine making decisions, not biased. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, I think privacy is the other one. So are we using all this information? How are we protecting it? So I think that becomes a problem. But I'd say, I'd say one of the major things is bias in understanding. So people don't understand it. And if you're using it in a very high critical situation, as well, a car, like driving a car, you're trusting your life with that. So a bit of work. So you need to kind of your operations around that, and its reliability needs to be extreme. And I don't think we've actually solved that. So people go, oh, why is it not being used? People are just nervous. No, they actually have valid reasons, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other comment?
So, it's fine.
I think it's important for the video, so maybe share this one. You guys will share. It's going now, but hello.
So, most of the time I find that when you go to the execs, you try to project AI as a big change to them. You tell them, okay, we are going to do this, we are going to do that, we're going to automate everything, we are going to solve your all problems, and then they get a bit confused because they have been struggling with these problems all the time, and all of a sudden you are saying that you're going to solve everything in just a fraction of time. Then they don't believe you. And now, no matter what you try to prove, no matter how smart you try to act before them, they just say, oh, hold on, let me understand what you're trying to say, and let me first digest it. And that's where, that's the learning, that whenever you take a very simple problem, deconstruct it in a solution that can be solved very easily, in a quickest possible of time, and then take it to them, not projecting as maybe attach AI, but not as some big change to them. Just something which is doable, and maybe they will start accepting it. And I guess you have to take that first step before making those big moves and putting big platforms in place for entire AI robotics.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I think the problem is something completely different. I think it's how do you sell artificial intelligence to a generation that's been raised watching Terminator. So there's the problem right there, and there's this long distance fear that somewhere along the line we'll create something that's more intelligent than us, and this thing that we create will behave towards us the way that we behave towards other species that are less intelligent than we are. And that's quite a, but it opens us up to our vulnerability and our culpability of being aware. And if other things that are aware and possibly more intelligent than we are have a relationship towards us that we may have to, say, Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump when we watch the movie. He's amusing and he seems to navigate the world very well, but would we want to be him? And it depends on it's a relationship question rather than a question about technology. I mean, does this technology make humans more productive, creative, and make human relationships better? And if it does, then we should certainly try it. Will it solve all of our problems? I don't know. That's kind of my answer to that question. Yeah.
If I could just add something to that, fear and risk to right off the back of what you mentioned a bit earlier. The way the businesses have been designed for hundreds of years is to manage risk. And you said, speaking to executives, the number one thing they'll watch out for is risk. And the fear of asking questions, I think, never mind the fear of Terminator. We've spent 30, 40 years watching movies about the glamour and the fear of what can go wrong. So maybe the bias of the future of what can happen with AI and the implications of maybe the good stuff, but then understanding what can go wrong. Kind of simplifying that to the buyers today that impact the future, and just understand, I think from the exec's point of view, to help them understand not only how the AI works from a technical point of view, but the power of opportunity in their hands. Maybe something that needs to be realized first before you allow that kind of floodgate to open.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think we also want to touch also on some of the pitfalls. How do you think, I think we would like to get people's opinion on bias as well. So if you can give a quick perspective, what's your take on how we should address bias and yeah, so maybe Owens, we can start with you. In terms of when you work at AppStar, well, you don't need to talk about all those kind of things, but how do you think about that in that type of environment?
Okay, so
because you're building deep learning, machine learning models.
So so I will start with the normal biases that you have in your head, and those are the assumptions that you think that you can actually do it, but when you get to the ground and you start doing the dirty work, you realize that you're far from the reality. So the first thing that you think you have all the data you can work with, but it's not true. Because the moment you are having a data in the organization and having the access to the data are two different things. That can take you forever. So till you can only say you have data when you have access to data, when you have it there. So yes, don't assume that you have data in the organization. Okay, so when you have the access to data, you think, okay, now you have solved the problem of the world, but no. Most of the deep learning models or algorithms that we use, they are supervised learning. So we are not yet very much active in the techniques in unsupervised, which is more of the clustering ones. So whatever we are doing, no matter how complex techniques we are using, they are all supervised learning. Now, what does that mean is every data set that you have needs to be labeled. Now, that means if you're working on text, for the entire sentence, it needs to mention that this is a query related to this. If you're working with image, then it needs to say, okay, this is the image of the document, this is the image of a person, and this is two persons sitting together, talking together, and this is head, this is body. If you want to build some interesting models. Now, those are the labeling is the most difficult part, and we assume that it will not take that long, but it takes most of your time when you are actually trying to solve the problem. Now, when you have solved everything and when you get to the execution or writing the algorithm part, I guess that becomes easier because the community is quite big and they are very open. They share everything. They share their learnings, weights, I mean all the techniques. So you can definitely learn and implement that. But till there, it's the challenges are different. Now, once you have done that, now putting that in the production, because in any organization, if you're just playing around with it, you're just experimenting, you're not showing the value to the organization. Organization won't see you as someone who can take the organization to the next level until you generate some revenue, until you do some cost cutting. And you can only do that when you take it to the production. Now that means you need that team that Ludik was mentioning, like software engineers, DevOps team, everyone. You need to integrate your solution into the rest of the organization. And again, that's the most painful thing, I guess. So productionization, don't assume anything, whether you are agile or whatever technique you're using, but please map everything before you start the project and put the right timelines against it.
Yep. Good, you touched on a few things. Yes, question. So we can open it up. Yeah.
On the issue of bias that you just touched now, what are your thoughts on off-the-shelf machine learning platforms? So to give context, is a lot of people are talking about machine learning, but they don't have the technical expertise to do it. And there are a lot of companies that are offering machine learning black boxes that are not suitable for Africa. So what are your thoughts on that?
They should be exposed and it should be highlighted, and we should talk about it a lot more because it is a major problem and I think if any of those American models are the ones you're probably talking about get here, I mean, none of them will work. And I'd hope that we realize pretty, immediately that it's going to be a problem. So the government's now pushing for, fourth industrial revolution. Let's put AI in everything. No, there are still tasks that need a human touch. So is there a good way around that yet? No, because no one's talking about it. And only the research is getting there now as to how can we pick up bias in these machines and how can we pick up and who do we hold accountable if it does end up in use and it does end up being a biased system. So yeah, coming to it just needs to be raised and we just need to talk about it and you need to bring it up every time you go to something and every time you see a machine learning being used, you need someone to ask that question because I don't think it gets asked anywhere in the world. There are a lot of people using it already. So yeah, sorry.
No, that's exactly right. You should jump in. Anyone else?
So, just on that, yeah. So, most of the time, these big organizations are quite hesitant to move their data on cloud. So the first thing they will say, okay, where my data is going. And now those are the challenges. Now it will take a lot of time for you to convince execs that no, either you're moving data out of the organization or keeping on-premise. And those are the challenges that you need to take care of. So whatever comes inbuilt or from Microsoft or from Google, you have to tell them where your data is going to be. And I guess that's one of the challenge.
What do you do there? How do you manage that? With these companies? Because I think we've all got those issues.
Yes, and also with the APIs, most of these companies when they provide you APIs, you just said, you cannot use them as they come, in the form that they come, because you have to train it. If you want to use the voice, you need to work on the accents, local accents. Then if you're working on the image, it's never, no matter how advanced those models are, they are trained for the generic data set. When we say deep learning, they are generic, made for everything. For your use cases, you have to use your own. No matter, I guess that's an overselling from kind of, they say you can use it, but you need to put your data there, you need to train those models further for your purpose to get the real value out of it.
I just want to quickly add to that. So we are, I don't know if you've heard about transfer learning. Okay, so that is an interesting way where you can use neural networks that is trained on lots of data, maybe to do image recognition, do things. But you can actually cut off some of the top parts, and you can train those systems on your data sets as well. So, and refine research, and we talk about bias and all sorts of things, but then make sure that this thing is more representative of maybe the territory, the region that you work with. So, a great opportunity to do that. So, it's like in the human brain, you create these high level, if you look at the vision system as well, so you detect edges and you put that together, and that should be generic, doesn't matter what, there's no bias really, it's recognizing little parts of an image, but it's how you build it up and how you're actually classifying it at the top, and that you can definitely fine tune. So plenty of opportunity, you shouldn't just use things out of the box and think these can solve all your problems. There was a question and then there, yep.
Let me just take the microphone to you.
Thank you. I think it would help if you can distinguish between AI, machine learning, and what's the other
Deep
one?
learning.
Deep learning and data mining.
Yes.
Because from what I'm gathering, I mean, the standard logistic regression would pass all those tests. So
Yeah.
so it would help if you can just put, AI is the buzzword. AI, but what's the difference?
Yeah, so we've got people, I'll answer that as well, so I'm deep involved in AI, machine learning, deep learning as well, but a number of people are. Jacques can also answer, but just in general, I showed that slide, we talked about AI, definitely a lot of hype and different types of thinking about AI, there's even talk about super general intelligence and narrow and all sorts of different things, you can talk about that. But machine learning, as I mentioned in that slide, it's really systems that learn from data. If you look at statistical techniques, there's a lot of instances, assumptions around the distribution, and if you look at probabilistic type of models, not all of that is pure data-driven. If you think about random forest, you think about decision trees, a lot of that is rule induction, is data-driven, but it's using also kind of statistical type of techniques, but it trains on data. So you're absolutely right. You can use those statistical models for classification, prediction, all the typical applications, and they are forming kind of a benchmark. If you think about logistic regression for credit scoring, you can use that for as a baseline, but you can create a champion challenger where you create a system that is learning from data, not just the statistical formulation stuff, but then compare it with those results, and that's more machine learning. Deep learning is just taking machine learning on steroids, and it's feeding with lots of data, and not only numeric data, it could be text data as well, video, audio, sequences, the whole spectrum, and it deals with that, and you've got all these layers and structures, convolutional neural nets, typical structures, almost like emulate your vision system in a simplified way, but it's extracting information and features, which is very different to statistical type of techniques. So the way I'm looking at it, it's all part of the toolbox. These are toolbox. Even if you look at AlphaGo, that was a really engineering Monte Carlo search. Normally, you've got search, but you're plugging in reinforcement learning, where you learn the policy and the value of each position. When you make a decision, that search is used to actually talk about the positions going forward in a chess game or a Go game or etc. But you use the reinforcement learning to actually determine the value. It's almost like short-circuiting the search, making the search much easier. Instead of doing brute force search through everything, it's actually guiding the search in the tree and helping you to make the right decisions. But that's an example of where it's a combination of techniques. So you can use geometric routines and algorithmic routines. And there was a thing by Francois Collet from Deep Learning, Future of Deep Learning, where he talks about going forward. The future of deep learning is actually, we talk about meta learners. And if you look at a task, you can have a system that looks at this task and says, okay, what do I need? What components of my library do I need? Geometric routines, algorithmic routines, routines that can maybe do reasoning, along with pattern recognition to solve particular problems. And you've got a meta learner that learns how to solve tasks. And as you solve things, you can also publish back to the library. So I think the future is probably around those type of things as well. So, yeah. Anyway, deeper answer, but yeah.
And then the AI part?
Well, AI is just an overarching term for software and machines that learn. That's it. And it could be statistical, it could be AlphaGo Zero. If you look at AlphaZero, superhuman performance, AI system, but it consists of good old-fashioned AI or computer science search plus deep reinforcement learning. And that's all part of AI. So AI consists of this, just making use of this smart toolboxes that can deal with stuff. Okay, so we've got a question there. I think you was first and then there. Okay. Maybe say what's your name as well. Or you don't need to. If you feel like I just want to ask it. Yeah. But feel free to do that. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Jacques. I'm from Kenya. And I'm in the public sector. I work for the African Union.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to ask in terms of bias, how do you deal with bias in terms of data? Because you know there is bias in terms of data collection. If people in an area decide to classify a BMW as a Mercedes-Benz, if you apply a supervised learning algorithm to that, you will carry the mistakes into your model. So how do you deal with bias in terms of data?
So that's a good question.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you deal with bias by having redundancy. So instead of having one point of reference that might be biased, you use multiple points of reference in the same way that we navigate through complex environments as people. We use multiple points of reference. And the more points of reference you can get in your data that sort of corroborates your hypothesis, the stronger your hypothesis is. Yeah, does that, I think that does.
What if you don't have that available? So let's say you've got, for instance, credit information. That's what you have. That's what you have to build the model on. But previously, so decisions were taken by some person And that's why you've got the data that you've now got. So you've booked accounts based on, how someone sort of,
Well, it's
decided beforehand.
It's no different from making a decision and having limited information. So if I play poker, I don't have data about my opponent's cards. It doesn't stop me from making the best decision I can make, given the information that I have at hand. So I think that's so
it's kind of a catch-22 almost. In the sense of,
so
it's probably the best that you can do.
Well, the thing is, we never have perfect information.
Yes.
And with limited information, we can do quite a lot. So there's no reason why sort of sufficiently sophisticated artificial intelligence shouldn't be able to do a lot with limited information.
Okay. Okay. Jay, I see you've got it.
Totally disagree.
That's what we like.
I totally disagree. Because if you're giving out, so as you say, you've got someone who's been detected to making biased decisions on, I don't know, giving someone
credit data.
Credit data, always a good example, I think. And you have the data, cool, you can train a model and be able to replace the human, but now you've taken the human element out of it as well. So now it's hard to detect that there is actually bias. I can point at someone and look at them and see, cool, they've caused problems, and I can be like, cool, well, let's get him out of that. But if the machine's doing that, people will just slowly not trust the machine and won't use it anymore. So I would say you have to push back at the data level before you even train it. That's all you have. If you've only got bad data and you want to put it in such a highly critical situation where you need to train it to do something so critical, and the data is notoriously bad, and if you can see evidence of it in the final model, then I think you need to push back and say, no, we need to sort out the data first before building the model, because then the model will be destructive as well. And if you're trying to put in, if you're not trying to correct the bias, then fine, but I think we should be trying to do that. Like, then encoding it moves away from, we can detect bias in the human. It's everyone goes, oh, it's the machine said it. It's fine. And that's happening in the States. They've got one of the states, they've got they've got a machine learning, well, some AI dictating how long your sentence should be. And they're encoding racial bias in the model. So people who are black get longer sentences for the same crime. Now imagine you're dealing with someone's life like that, and that's what's happening with credit lines. It's exactly the same thing. So it's such a critical thing. You need to spend a lot more time figuring out if your data is okay and excluding people that you know might have a problem from the data. If that's all you got, you need to make a big call of whether this is ethically okay to even put it in that situation. Yeah.
Okay, so you can tell that I'm a theoretician. I don't practical problems. But we obviously have models embedded in our human hardware for detecting biases, and so there's the most evolved area of the brain is the neocortex, which maps essentially other areas of the brain. And detecting bias is quite a difficult skill because it means making a map of some other map that you've created. So if it were possible to train AI to make maps of other AI, we could use that in principle to detect biases. And until we can do that, we've got to use humans to detect biases. So, because detecting a bias is a frame of reference problem. You have to have some frame of reference as to what is normal in order to understand whether something is in the tail of the distribution as a bias.
Just to add on that, so most of the time when you have the biases, you have to be creative. So with your data, you need to understand what your data is saying and what you can implement. So for example, if you have a limited data of transactions or very limited data of, say, some IoT data on the networks, and of course it's biased because it has seasonality, it has you have picked the data when the network was congested and those kind of stuff. Now, how do you deal with that? So, only if you can be creative. Yes, there are various approaches that you can apply to it, and starting from statistical to computer science approach. So, you look at different distributions, but also in the techniques, like for such a small data set, can you transform it into something else that can give you a totally different perspective to go to the output? So for, say for the network congestion problem, you have a seasonality data which is just for very, it has a biases of those congestions. Then how do you, if you transform those data, say if you have to work on the models, it will definitely be not right output, but if you transform that into time series, if you transform that into totally different, so time series is a sequence data, and when you start creating the sequences for very limited amount of time, you will create too many sequences of the data set. Now you have multiplied your data points several times, and then you can implement so many different techniques on top of that that you can deal with it to some level, and being aware of it, that okay, you have the biases in the technique. And I guess, yes, I guess that's the one practical solution we come up with a lot of time, if you know that if there are biases, or even.
I absolutely agree. I just want to add on to what you're saying in terms of creativity as well. Even if you think about AlphaZero, just use that example as well, initially, the initial systems trained against, well, we looked at the expert players, how they play, and simulate that and play against the expert players. And that generates data, so you can play. Then it can play with itself. And then also what happens, it actually generated synthetic data. It actually generates the data. And it didn't need humans to actually, so you can, in the same way, be creative. It's like engineering. It's just, you're aware of certain bias. You say, okay, I'm aware of this. I'm going to, maybe it's low representation of specific things. Then you can say, okay, let's generate more data. We just synthetically generate more data around this so you can get more a balanced perspective. So back to what Jay was saying, so you're just trying to be practical from an engineering perspective. There are many things that we can do, but it's back to the machine learning AI engineer to look at the data and engineer it out if you can. But so you've got to be responsible. That's about being responsible.
Okay, sorry, last question.
Hi, I'm Kurulego and I'm from PwC. Actually, I have two questions. So my first question is more around how do industries or certain companies or institutions collaborate on data to sort of greater enable, the artificial intelligence or machine learning agenda? Because just an example, for example, within maybe APSA, right, when trying to improve upon the use of artificial intelligence within the bank, it's often limited to the data available within the bank itself. Has there been practice or, like within the banking sector where you find different banks collaborating on data to improve the level of what we can achieve with artificial intelligence predictions or what we can achieve with machine learning? And then the second question is around, probably one of the reservations that corporates have to adopting artificial intelligence around the cost of maintaining this technology itself, because it has a couple of building blocks that come together to create the actual solution, and there's no one corporate perhaps that owns the entire value chain. So would you find that some corporates actually, when you look at the cost of maintaining an artificial intelligence solution as opposed to the benefits that it brings in, sort of has an impact in them buying into this artificial intelligence or machine learning agenda?
That looks like it's aimed at you.
Okay, so for us to identify if this is an AI use case or not, you have to just apply the common sense. Okay, what is available to you and what you can possibly do in the more realistic way. Because setting wrong expectation for anyone will really challenge you. Maybe you can, so in certain times you will put like, okay, we can do this, we can do that, and you will get the buy-ins from execs. But the next time, if you haven't delivered it, the next time when you go back to them, it's really difficult for you to ask them for anything. So that's why you have to be very realistic, tell them what is possible and what is not possible. Then also, like, you need to put a kind of checklist. Like, okay, if I want to do AI, it's not just like for the sake of AI you should be doing it. Think of a very simple problem, what you're trying to solve. So say, I'll give you one example. So say, it's like just too many telematics or in a very simple form for the for the vehicle insurance. Okay, it's a big industry, big problems, challenges. You can do a lot of automation, but the thing is, can you do everything? The question is, can you do everything? Can you automate all the claims? Can you automate all onboarding? Can you automate the entire process, all the documentation? No. That's not, it will take like at least 3 to 4 years if you do it properly. So you have to just choose what is feasible, maybe just windscreen. Like, can you fix the windscreen and can you detect some of the challenges in the windscreen and fix that one first? And then show the value to the execs and organization. Okay, you can do some automation, and then once you have got the buy-in, you will have more fun, you will have a bigger team to execute it further. So I guess that's where you need to be very sensible and careful on what you're projecting, like how, while you're thinking for those use cases. You have to be very careful.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's the first one.
My question is more around the cost element around like going full scale AI.
So yeah, that's your second question.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cost would be like maintaining cost is hardly any. If you're really automating something which has a value for any organization, let it be big or small organization, and I guess that's why there are so many startups coming into the picture, because they can maintain those technologies at a much cheaper price than those bigger organizations, and they can deliver a service that bigger organizations will have to go through a lot of compliance and other challenges. So I guess the cost is when we go to when we take any of the use cases, we say we keep very clear KPIs, like how much cost we are going to cut, like on the cost cut, on the efficiency, like are we improving the efficiency, are we increasing the productivity, are we generating more revenue. So there are certain KPIs, and then we measure every use case on those KPIs, that way it's adding the value. And if you have a clear value, then like whatever is the maintenance cost, I guess that will be taken care of. So you want to?
Yeah. I actually want to ask you a question as well, but there's interest.
So one of the things that you've seen work is to start with the business case of why you would ever do this. Because execs have got competing projects. And we spoke a little bit earlier about not understanding AI. So if you don't understand it, it's something else you can understand much easier, and you can get the ROI, for example, there. They're probably going to back that horse much faster than picking the one which is so complex to understand right now. And what we've seen is exactly that. Start with the business case of why would you ever do this compared to the other 20 things on your agenda today. And it may go beyond just the windscreen. It would be like, if you do these 4 things today, we think that we can prove to you that the ROI of doing this part or component, which is an understandable part of AI, will beat what you're trying to do over there 7 days a week. Starting with a conversation like that we've seen normally opens up the doors, because then you avoid having to go to delving into the depths of why you would do this. And when they get that, then the attention comes in terms of, okay, now you don't need to just fund the windscreen, but okay, I feel like I can understand how to solve for an industry level thing, which helps my bank compete, or maybe I don't have to be a bank anymore, for example, which is a bigger topic. So, and then I think cost comes last. It's more like why.
Yep. Alistair, I just want to ask you, we've got that robotic process automation thing there. Just
this is coming.
I'm going to ask you a question. You're the expert on RPA. Maybe if you could just quickly, in a nutshell, just say what it is, and also we talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth. How do you see the future where this is growing, robotic process automation?
Yeah, jobs. Where is it going in terms of jobs?
Yeah, exactly. Job, you should cover all of that. Good point. So it's a loaded question.
Yeah, it is loaded. I think people might marry robots one day and we don't have to robots.
Shape a better future, please don't.
I did that on purpose. I don't think the word robot counts today when you speak about automation. It's a bit sensational to my mind. And people hang their hat on that because they want to, we spoke about earlier, you want to make more money or be famous or do like whatever you think is cool. I don't think that counts.
Yeah.
It's more like the phenomena of the collection of technologies together. I do think that people are going to forget the word robots and focus on human first.
I agree.
Like the number one thing on planet Earth would be put the human in the middle and then try to understand how am I going to help your life be better using these technologies, of which AI and robots. And I mean, we discussed the word around what is the definition of AI. It's the umbrella term of a collection of technologies moving at an exponential rate together with data and all these other topics that you've spoken a bit earlier. So most interestingly, what we think around this is that the focus channels to human number one, and it's not because this falls into the background, the topics that you've spoken to today. It's because I think the impact is so severe that it can be enablement and many other things that are clear to you guys already.
Yeah. And when you think about RPA just as a technology, from a machine learning AI perspective, you see more, because there's not necessarily AI or it's rules-based systems.
So RPA is not machine learning, NLP, and AI, and all these other definitions in the broad umbrella. I think that'll be commoditized in 2 or 3 years in South Africa. Then Africa will wake up and then see, okay, it's cheaper, it's safer, it's okay. My job's not going to go away. I can actually have my life back. I'm not going to growl at you because I can work now.
Yeah.
I can have fun, and it's okay because it's a bit cheaper. You can still pay me the same amount of money. I can go to work and those things. What we see there is that when it becomes commoditized, humanity will move to a different level and they'll ask different questions about, I'm no longer scared of this, so maybe I don't have to be so scared about what's coming next.
Okay.
And then they wake up and say, okay, but now I can move a little bit more further. The topics we were speaking a bit earlier about truly understanding that starts with a very basic vanilla, what I call RPA 1.0 today. And get humans safe with that. And it's the first stepping stone to get into your execs to say, oh, it's okay, we can actually maybe do this. And then all the other guys, such as South Africa, I mean, employment is a thing. So you'll have unions and all sorts of things going on in that space that you need to compete with. I also think that you might spot a bit of regulation in Africa around what they call bots, whatever you want to call that thing, let alone AI when they get to understand what that may or may not do.
Get conscious.
Yeah. I saw some interesting examples in the US about people wanting to use ML to get seeds so that you could grow vegetables very quickly. And they forgot all around about the reg and can people really die when you live? Is it okay? Is it cheap? I just want to sell vegetables into Africa. And I think regulation will be a big thing the minute that the world understands the first parts of the basics. So it's not fun. So we probably want to spend a lot of our time getting all the lies today that you're worried about the Terminator stuff. And then there's people that haven't seen Terminator and they just think, oh no, I can't understand it, I'm going to clamp down instead of saying no, and then the reg kicks in.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, simple entry point to how you can block the next step, as weird as that sounds, when people understand those basics.
Absolutely. Just a quick comment. Will you take more questions? Okay. So I think it's quite interesting where we are in the smart technology era. If you look at the computer, you've got keyboards, mouse, all sorts of stuff. I think what's happening now with AI and smart technology, it's almost like more adapting to us in the sense that we can now start talking. You can understand. Maybe don't need to think about programming and stuff. You can just say, I want to generate a program to do this. So it's almost like buildings becoming more intelligent. Maybe it's you just speak and doors, and even if you go through this particular building, it's a smart building. People are like, maybe not. I'm not sure of AI, everything here, but at least it's IoT and stuff picks up the sensors, picks up. We are entering, make the lights, open up the lights. So I think it's. I think it's going to be an interesting world, and that's how you shape a better future. It's human-centered. Use this stuff to support us. You lead it already into the next thing, where I want to ask about regulation. So I just want to open it to other people as well. You see Elon Musk and a lot of people talk about regulation. I don't know who's seen that movie, documentary that talks about, do you trust this computer? You can just Google it on YouTube. Do you trust this computer? It was viral. It was like, if you haven't seen it, it's cool. There's a lot of good points made there. With Elon Musk and there's a bunch of people in there, and Stuart Russell and people that's very knowledgeable in AI speaking about that. And but it ends with AI needs to be regulated. So I want to talk about that. So I think there's a lot of researchers that think, well, we're far off. You don't want to regulate the research and the progress with AI. But clearly on the application level, because that's what you're alluding to. If you think about self-driving cars, you think about weaponized systems, clearly, well, that's kind of stuff that you want to look at. And maybe now also Facebook, you think about data privacy, and you think about bias, and you think about those type of things. Sure. Okay. Do you want to maybe add anything to the regulation thing? Okay. There was a question here, and then back, just one. Sure. Yeah. And there's another question here, so let's get Mac want to ask a question. So maybe there, Mac.
JPC from Grand Challenge Technologies. I'm a technologist, and I find myself, I'm sure some of you guys as well, I'm often in a happy bubble of technology. The phrase that I hear a lot from Dr. Eng is AI is the new electricity. A good percentage of our populace doesn't even have electricity yet. So, opportunity, pitfall, both. How do we address some of that?
That's a good question.
You talk about we don't have even electricity stuff. Yeah.
How do we even get AI to people when some people don't even have electricity yet? How does GoGo get her AI?
Absolutely. So for me, it's even if you look at solving, even if you want to do automated AI, you want a company to be transformed by AI, they need to have a solid data foundation anyway. So there's basics that you need to solve. In Africa, we need to invest in infrastructure. We want education, healthcare. It was so important in Africa as well, especially education. And we need internet connectivity for everyone. It should preferably be made free. Well, it's education. So we need to be a lot more aggressive than we are. And I think this is what we need to talk to governments, Cyril, Maputo. If you think about it, give people more access to technology, smart technology, and help shape and guide that so that people are, children learn quickly. My son is 15 years old, he does Keras and Python, Arduinos, and well, just go to YouTube, learn, go to this, you teach them a little bit, then they go. And we can open it up, we should open it up. So if we want to compete internationally, if you think about China, and France and Russia, even Putin mentioned the importance of AI. The American the president of France talked about this, allocating government funding for this as well. So we need to think about it.
I just want to ask a question on that, Jacques. So you spoke about tools that you can use, to build these things. How do you guys feel about tools that, build it for you? So you've got those tools out there, for instance, like data robot, as an example. How do you feel about those tools? Do you think they would be quite useful to use? Because what they're actually doing is, they're opening it up to the broader market. So guys who can't necessarily code, as an example.
Okay, so community is moving in that direction where they are trying to make it more commoditized or more democratized for everyone so that they can start using AI in some form. And if you see from the tools perspective like TensorFlow and all, what it used to be in the past is not today. So we all use KRs and lighter versions of the TensorFlow and now the TensorFlow JS. So even the community is trying that everyone, all the software engineers and all the technicians, whoever are there, they can be part of it. So someone who was just programming on browser, on HTML, and so now they can program in JavaScript, the whole AI thing. Now it gives that capability to everyone that at least with the minimum knowledge of those, because JavaScripts are not that difficult. Now if you say someone who wants to be part of AI and who doesn't have the knowledge of AI, I guess there's various roles in AI. You don't have to program everything because you need to come up with a lot of ideas that what you think can solve a problem. And then you can always find someone who will do it for you. So if you're really passionate about it, if you really want to make it happen, you will find someone. So that's not a problem. So just to give you one very simple example, we were doing this social project where we make kids in Townsend, and they had this challenge where they were dropping, like it's a normal problem in South Africa that they drop out, and when we were doing the research, we found that the problem was more around the motivation. So like they didn't have enough motivation. So now that's a problem. How do you deal with that problem? So from the tools, like what you can do for those kids, you do not have enough tools. But what we found when they go to school, they have some, and I'm talking about MIIA and Soweto and those areas where at least they have some internet in school, then they have mobile phones. So we reached out to them through, we created that mentor and mentee relationship through WhatsApp and through different channels, and try to assign one mentor to motivate, because they were very basic problems. And once we found that solution, we then thought of how we can automate it. So tools, you will find it somewhere. You can always get something which can work for you.
So, I just want to add, to what I asked earlier. So some of the tools that you can find out there actually, build the models for you. So you basically put in, whatever data you want to use, and basically press a button, and does all your sort of pre-processing, labeling, all of the stuff that you need to do, and it spits out this magical answer at the end. That's really for me, what I'm asking around this is, how do you guys feel about that? A very good example of that is potentially, data robots. Is a good one there. One that I can also think of is H2O.ai. How do you guys feel about those tools? Because that sort of supposedly makes the whole process shorter for you and simpler in a sense.
Okay, I'm going to try and answer this question with an analogy. At some point, only blacksmiths used to use hammers, and now you can buy a hammer nearly everywhere, and most people have access to them. So, if you think of AI as being a tool for recognizing and understanding patterns of data, then it could be quite handy to have a very easy to use interface that helps, for example, the political science make sense of election patterns. And one doesn't necessarily have to build everything from first principles all the time. It's a very useful thing, but the downside of it is that you're giving something that's very powerful to someone who may not understand it very well, in which case you're going to get biases because somebody doesn't understand how to interpret or understand or make sense of the information that's being put in front of them. But those things happen anyway in other areas.
Okay. There's a few questions. There was Mac, we've got a question there and there, so I just want to go in order. Sorry, Mac was then Ludik, you go to you. I think it was.
Hello, my name is Mac. Just a question. I think I understand the opportunities about AI and machine learning, but what is still not yet clear for me is what are the real pitfalls of AI and machine learning. And also I'd like you to cover things like your cybersecurity, where does that fall in, and also around data privacy. Thanks.
Exactly. You've got a similar question. You want to add on to that? The same question. Okay, so he's got the same. Maybe you want to add a question? You just want to address that question because I think if there's, we don't want to keep people too late. These people want to actually squeeze out a little bit more time.
Just in terms of, I come from public sector, so
yes.
I look at the policy. After Facebook debacle, we know there's going to be regulation on data access and all that. And how are we going to deal with data sovereignty? Because once, especially for global companies like ABSA, PwC, how are you going to do data sovereignty? Because it's going to come. You're going to get a point where governments are going to say our data must be hosted locally and must be accessible locally. So how are we going to deal with that? Because it's going to impact, especially if you're looking at the global Africa, if you want to do products for the whole continent. And then another question is, there's also a push for open data.
Yes.
We want the data to be open. And how do we navigate, because there's open data, then there's the issue of now data privacy and data security.
I think the good thing is in the healthcare, just pitfalls stuff. Yeah, the good thing in the, that Azure, Amazon both are going to put data centers up here locally. So that's going to be great. That's going to be super important for healthcare as well. So there's initiatives going on right now where we're looking at hosting our healthcare data here in South Africa as well, because we don't want that out. And I'm sure, I think with ABSA, you're hosting things on premise, you're anyway keeping that data.
So data security is the highest priority for us at the moment. So whatever we do, even if we don't go to market, even if we don't go to in the production environment with certain products, it's fine, but we cannot just breach some of those data privacy laws. So it's actually very strict as a bank. So we have to take care of that. So innovation comes later to the security.
Yeah.
So I just want to add to his question. We've said everything's great, and there's lots of sort of things that we can do. What are the bad things about AI? Where's the actual pitfalls in terms of this?
I think bias, we've talked about it. I think it's on the application side. It could be very dangerous. Use weaponized systems, and so really, so we need to shape it and we need to regulate that and do that properly. Data privacy, we've touched on bias, security. It's all those type of things. I'm not sure in terms of other types of pitfalls. Yes.
So there's certain things on from the research side, the publications that you get on AI, because whatever developments we do, we first go look into the research papers, and because everyone is trying to publish papers nowadays in AI, the quality of those research papers are not that good. So for you to actually look into the problem statement and then relate it to an actual research paper, and then find one that works for you will take very long time, because most of the time they will have some they will leave out some of the information intentionally. So they will not mention the data sets. They will not put the right matrices. So you cannot replicate those results. And this is a global problem, not just in the country, but every researcher complains about this. And if you are actually a practitioner, then you will know how much time you could waste just because of that. You could spend 3 to 6 months researching, referencing to 1 or 2 paper, and you realize. And this was one of the scenario when we went back to the actual author of those research papers. They said, "Oh, that was a crap. We just published it. Now we don't want to."
Thank you for wasting my time.
So So we wasted like 3 to 4 months on that, and after that you realize that. So it's really difficult to manage that. And then also the speed. With the speed that it's developing, it's very difficult to keep up with everything. Now you have to decide where you want to focus in AI. AI is becoming big, and there's so many techniques and technologies that you will just, no matter, even as an organization, if you want to do everything, possibly you won't be able to do. So you have to focus where you want to excel, and those key areas where you can create those differences in the market, I guess.
Gladly.
I'll just shout.
No, I'm going to give you the mic. You want to make sure we hear your voice.
I'm not sure that I've got much of a voice left. I'm going to throw a quick cryptic question at
Project Ubu, by the way.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a quick cryptic question at Roshan because I think he's the only one who will have a clue what I'm talking about. And I'm going to see what spits out of that. In respect of opportunities and pitfalls, concentrator or diffuser?
You know, you have to explain to us as well.
Okay, so we both work on the same team, so this is kind of an insider question. But if you don't know about Uru, conventional money kind of concentrates resources because of interest. So you have the system that keeps building dams, and Ubu works on the principle of diffusion. So it's a bit like rain. You drop everything across the system and you see what springs out of it. And I don't know whether your question is about Ubu or
not. No, it's about AI using that in that.
So I mean, just if you just take the example of Amazon's recommendation engine, which tells you which books other people like and are similar to books that you might like, I would say AI is very diffuse, and it's also it's hidden away from us. AI has been doing things for us for a long time without us realizing. I have a friend who works quite high up in Amazon, and he says people always make the mistake of thinking that Amazon is a retailer. It's a software company. That's always been a software company, and what they figured out is just ways to use their software intelligently to make retail better, to do it better than others. So in that sense, if every little company has access to the same pool of resources in terms of AI that Amazon has had for the last 20 years, then we could potentially do very, very good things. If we misuse those resources in the same way, we could potentially do very bad things. Humans have a propensity for both. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that one. There's a question there.
Can I just jump in really quickly? One of the pitfalls that I tend to see with AI technologies is a loss of critical thinking among its users, the end users, that kind of rely on technologies in unthinking ways. That's a truism, everyone would agree with that. But I'd counter and ask, what's the opportunity to use AI-powered education platforms, and is anyone taking the lead on that?
In terms of, sorry, you want to answer?
No.
Jake, go for it.
Cool. So, is anyone taking the lead? There are a couple of companies I know that are looking into it, but I think it depends on where. You mentioned, if you're saying education.
Education. I'll quickly talk about that.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
go then, because I think there are also different places in education you could use it. So, if we're talking from a purely very speaking to an actual tutoring someone and having an AI teach, I don't think we're quite there yet, because NLP still has a little bit of a while to go. But I'd say from a marketing perspective, they're getting better at that, and from building useful systems and from a data analytics perspective, we're getting there. I don't know who the leaders are, but he knows.
Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, even if you could Google talk to books, okay, so one could probably question to what extent does it really understand semantically what this means. I think when you talk about learning, you want to assess what is the learner's comprehension of a particular subject and stuff. I think we've got the tools to build. The NLP is just the the front layer around this is actually still the concepts. How do you represent that? You get concepts that's represented in multidimensional space. You can work with those kind of things, and you can maybe relate that. If you've got a knowledge base around this, and you've got your concepts represented in that knowledge base, and you can mathematically work with that. That's like word to vec, where you can do queen plus king minus this, and you get to something. So there's limited forms of some sort of understanding. But if you extrapolate that, I think there's great potential. There is, I don't know if you know, St. Paul Allen's Institute of AI. They are working on systems where it's trying to pass grade 7, 8, 9 exams, papers and stuff, and they're working on those type of things, and they're trying to push the limits there as well. So there's a bunch of stuff on that front. We're looking at working with NASPARS. They've got a social impact thing with NASPARS labs, and they actually want to put an AI-based learning system in place in these labs that can help the kids in rural communities and stuff. So we might get involved in that as well. I've also invested in a company called Student Hub that's looking at potentially bringing in AI and stuff like that as well. So it's evolving, but I think the technology stacks. I think you'll see stuff evolving, happening in the next few years for sure. Yeah. And that's an area that we need because we want to scale. We want to. The quality of education needs serious attention, and we need to scale that. So that's an area of very great importance.
I don't know if people know about Wolfram Alpha.
Yes.
So
very good.
Yeah. So when I was teaching math students at Rhodes, that's pretty much what they used as a go-to to check their solutions if they bother to do the tutorials anyway. But that's a AI teaching aid right there.
The great answers. Thanks everyone.
It's
like
one more thing I commissioned.
Yes. We're probably going to end after that, unless someone's got more. There's no question, there's one. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just an answer to the education using AI. And there's a field of psychometrics called computerized adaptive testing that uses logistic regression to decide which questions to ask a student. So usually a test is a set amount of questions, everybody answers the same questions. In computerized adaptive testing, they use statistics really to decide what question will provide the most information based on the student's ability in a given domain. So I think Khan Academy is using those sort of techniques to decide which questions to give a student so that they can learn as fast as possible. That's one application.
Yeah. Good point.
Sorry, what's the name of that company? Which lab?
Khan Academy.
Yeah, Khan Academy. You know all the stuff at Khan Academy.
So hi, I'm Tabero. I just wanted to ask on the issue of trust, right? More around, if we look at the scenario where the self-driving car in Arizona actually hit a human being and they died. In that case, the same thing could have happened with a normal driver, but the judgment that's given to a self-driving car is different compared to what would have happened if it was a driver. So looking at something like when we're putting in machine learning and putting in artificial intelligence, how do we bridge the gap between the kind of criticism that's going to be put where a wrong decision is made or right decisions are made based on a machine that's making the decision compared to the same wrong decision could be made by a human being? So how do we then bridge that gap?
Alistair, I think that's one you could answer probably quite well.
So that's part of your job to start with. The rest of the guys in the room. I mean, Gerard would probably respond about responsible and explainable AI. I don't think we've solved that yet. No chance. We're a way off. You mentioned a bit earlier about having conversations. I think we need to be talking about that a lot because it hasn't been solved. And trust comes through understanding and demonstrating that trust. I think, so just headline from my side, I'm sure there's many things that are going to come out here.
So, certain things like, obviously self-driving is a very complex technique and there are a lot of other algorithms, like multiple algorithms are running in the background. But for very simple technique, you have to come up with a very simple metrics that all the right matrices that can measure the true potential or the accuracy, and not just the accuracy and the precision when we calculate, when we predict, but there are a lot more other matrices that you need to take care of. Also, it's a lot of those are decided by human by putting a threshold. So you can put 70% or sometimes 50% as your positive, sometimes 90% as your positive, and that's where it starts learning. So I guess you have to, when you start those processes with very advanced modeling techniques, you have to be very careful right from the scratch. Use the right matrices, I guess.
I think, this is a big thing for banks. Banks don't want to use it, in various areas because they need to understand, what the actual model does. I think that's a big thing that we need to figure out. Because they're saying, so, okay, you've got the model, it's given me, for instance, 25% lift, anything I've seen before, but it's black box. So how do you explain it? I think that's the big question that we still need to address in this space.
Also about the false negatives, because you are getting good results, but
Yes.
what about the negative impacts? So what about those false negatives?
Yeah. Just quickly, even in the 2000s, when we looked at neural nets and applying it, to get to kind of insights, we created these knowledge dashboards, knowledge extraction dashboards that do causal analysis and sensitivity analysis on a neural network, on a model. And that, what it means is you can perturb inputs with, say, 5% of its standard deviation in a positive or negative direction, and you do that, and you can see what's the effect in the output. And you can do it for all the inputs, all the features, keeping it, focusing just on this one, keeping all the others the same. And you can do it across the whole data set as well. And that way you can actually create causal analysis and sensitivity analysis, all sorts of stuff. So that's just ways of extracting knowledge. And what we've also done is maybe using a combo. We've got, say, rule induction, and you've got, say, neural networks. And when you run through the data, say you're looking at runaway temperatures in the fins, whatever, you see what's happening there. You can maybe say, okay, when it's above the threshold, that area, that is the average cause for process deviation, why it's happening. But you also see what rules are firing at that particular point in time. It gives you a bit more insights, and it's getting closer to explanations as well. But the problem is when we get deep learning neural nets and all these kind of stuff, so we've got a lot to do. So I agree with that. We've got, I think, one question, and then there's another one there, but first, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kim. It was a very similar question. I just wanted to know how human reliability or accountability comes into play when AI fails.
Also, regulation needs to catch up because they need to understand that's also not been solved, because you need kind of like who owns what. Like, was it me? Did it teach itself? Those kind of topics that hasn't been figured out. And I think that, again, I know I've mentioned regulation a couple of times. I might as well just talk loud.
There we go.
So I think it's our responsibility to help other people understand when we get to the point. I think most people just get bored with regulation, so you don't want to waste your time with that to do all the cool stuff. Just do all the stuff you used to do. The same as what business models are. I think that regulations need to open up completely, so that thing needs to change and also hasn't been figured out yet. So that there you might need dynamic regulation, which, I mean, that's not quite me just saying that in itself. So as weird as it sounds, as AI kind of matures and then, like, when we can trust it to explain itself one day, instead of us as humans sitting here trying to justify what's happening today with AI, I think when we solve that might help understand, like, who owns what. So it's more like we think we know what we want to fix, but we haven't got it there yet. So we didn't answer your question, but we know what to worry about.
Alvin? And then?
Hello, Alvin from ESCO. So I've got a bit of a different view. I think, like, as humankind, it took us a long time to really get, and we're not even there, but to really get understanding of, like, what's good and what's bad. We went through multiple wars, etc., to just get there, or just to understand why. And it's still there today. So my question is really, like, I think when we're developing it, we've built this already, like, we've started building our constitution, we've put in laws. Why are we not building AI on that? Because that's what we use currently to regulate what's happening around us.
How do we know we got it right the first 300 years?
Sorry?
How do we know we got it right the first? How do we know we got it right the first 300 years that this stuff isn't actually better and we should be learning from it?
I don't think. No. I think it's a starting point, yes. Because if we go now and like one of our laws would say like we should give people equal opportunities, right? So then, like for me, what that means is if you go in and you build your model, you should really not be building in anything about gender or color or anything like that. I think we figured out that we shouldn't be judging people on that. So why do we still consider that in our models? Or, I'm not saying we are, but like I'm sure people still have a few of those variables in their data set.
It's going to be liability, which has got nothing to do with that, maybe. Like life, death, longevity, capitalism, greed.
Yes, it's not the model, it's actually the data.
Yeah.
It's the human, I think, who generates the data.
That proxy, yeah. We can delve into that topic as well. That's actually things to say, but just want to say at the back and then just try to do it in order.
I'm going to get fit here tonight.
My question is, I think a bit of technical in nature. It's with regards to your actual, and obviously it's purely data driven, right? Most of your advances in AI and machine learning, and it's mostly around the availability of data size that you were working with, but also like the data quality itself. So with regards to just, moving more beyond, like more advanced in terms of what we can achieve with AI, is it a possibility whereby we have, I know data quality is important in nature, but in terms of like advancing that agenda, is there a way in which we can sort of find how to work with the data that we have available in terms of, instead of just focusing on the data quality, we have to increase our machine learning and AI that we achieve?
So, just to make sure I understand, you're talking about can we use AI even if we haven't figured out data quality?
Yeah.
Cool. So, most organizations, their data quality isn't good. So you have to start somewhere. It's a thing that get it out, show what you can do with the little bit of data you have. Data, I was going about like, there's never, perfect data doesn't exist, right? So there is going to be, like, even data that is only 60% okay, or particularly if you're using it in, or depending on the use case, like that can get you pretty far. That can get you very far. And from there, you can show value with that small amount of data, and then use that to, once again, speak to CEOs and be like, cool, so we've done this with this amount of data. Can we put in processes to improve your data quality over time? You do that after the fact. So you try to sell them on this, cool, this is what we can get to already. This is how far we can get already with what we have. But imagine what we do if we improve it. Because often you can go and you be like, cool, you can try and do what machine learning with what they have. Some models actually help cater for like bad quality data. So as you say, if you have enough, any kind of random things in the data will eventually just get ignored. But if there's a large significant portion of it, then you can still make an advisable on that. So you can be like, cool, now let's put in the pipeline to fix the data, and in a year we'll come back and we can use that data and build a better model. So.
Ongoing process all the time.
Yeah.
Question, it's probably the last question.
Sure. So governments, Itabile from ESCOM, governments will often do censuses to ensure that they know who their electorate body is and to prepare for upcoming elections and things like that. But I'm wondering if companies, organizations that provide goods and services are interested in collecting data in informal ecosystems and communities and so forth, because to me, that's a whole missed opportunity, because in our country there's many people who are quote unquote off the grid in one way or another, but they are consuming goods, they are consuming services, they do have some form of currency that they are trading and living on. So is there tools, is there an interest, is this considered an opportunity?
I think it's definitely an opportunity. I just want to.
I think it's enormous. I should stop doing this, right? I think it's an enormous opportunity, and again, that's a conversation we should be having every single week, not only in this room but all over the place. That cuts exactly to the heart of putting human first. For example, we should be having conversations with the government about, instead of everyone just having a phone, just make glass accessible to people, and you pay for it as a government. But we help you solve those problems. And the only way they're going to get there, I think, is the question you've asked now. Again, it's not been solved, but this, I think, will come from enlightenment, not through algorithms, but from human need, what you've said now. And then when you feed that thing, and then you will start understanding just how quickly I think money can flow to help fix those problems. That's a long topic, as well just as these others are.
Yep.
So, I guess this was the discussion in MIIA as well.
Yeah.
And if we wait for government, if we wait for someone else to take those initiatives, it will never happen, or it will take a very long time. And with the pace that world is moving, if we really want to be there, then as a community we need to take initiative, some kind of initiative. Like we are 50 people there, we can try something. And how we can decentralize certain data sets, how we can democratize these techniques. And I guess if we can take some initiatives here, then it will grow, and then governments and other institutions will follow it, and they will become part of it. But we have to initiate that.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
So there's lots of interest in being able to support people that are somehow off-grid and disconnected from normal economies and proof of identity and things like that. And I don't think that you can solve that problem at a high level. You've got to solve it on the ground, very practically and pragmatically. So, for example, there's an institute in Durban called AFRA, and they basically go to people and say, take a photo of yourself in front of your house and send it to us. And this is, in a sense, proof of something. These people don't have documents, they don't have, there's no way to say they own this, and they can be easily moved off of their property, and their rights can be completely violated without any record. So where there's an opportunity for AIs to scale up little initiatives like that and to automate them so that we can improve the quality of record keeping for people that essentially don't have records. And by solving lots of these little problems, you can then change an economy or change a continent. And the vision is as big as the people that are leading it.
Absolutely. You were referring to a panel discussion with deep learning and Java X. We actually have a video of that as well. So we'll make it available by the Machine Intelligence Africa website as well in the coming days, as well as this as well. So you can go to that. Absolutely agree. I just want to say thank you to everyone here. It's been awesome. Thank you very much to the whole panel here. You guys were awesome. Thanks to Gerard, PwC. You were fantastic. I think there's some food, there's some water there, still there. And I think the goal is to make sure everything's got to go. Please take it. Everything's got to go. So thank you very much once again.